On today's episode, we have a 1995 Nissan S14. Stick around so you see how we go from this to this. We have a lot of work to do, so let's get straight to it. I've had this car sitting for almost a year. Last time I drove it was the day that I bought it. I just bought it and drove it into the garage, and it's been there ever since. The car is complete and it drives just fine, but it needs a paint job. So let's go ahead and start the engine and just make sure that everything's working the way it should be. So we open the hood and everything checks out just fine. There's no leaks, no dead animals, none of that stuff. So we can go ahead and move on to the next step. Since the car has been sitting for a while, we did lose some air on some of the tires, so let's go ahead and put some air on them and then we can go ahead and take it out for a wash. So the car is clean now and ready to work on, but before anything, take a seat with me here. And let me clarify that I bought the car as it is. I did not do that to the paint. But that's the reason I bought it. I wanted to paint it, have some fun with it, and possibly end up with a beautiful 240. But sitting here and talking about it ain't gonna get us anywhere, so let's get to it. The magic starts and we start prepping the surface for primer. I can't recall what grit I was using, but I hope I was somewhere close to 80 grit, maybe 120, 180 at least, since we need that primer to have a good surface to grab onto. After all the sanding is done, we can now start masking everything that we do not want paint on. So have patience, take some time, and put some good detail into the masking, because a bad masking job could come back at the end and ruin all that hard work you're about to put into your car. Now we're getting ready to spray some primer, and we're going to mix this primer in a more of a filler primer, which means it will lay down in thicker layers to fill most of the imperfections. Alright, so the car is fully primered. And the good thing is that now we are able to fully see what we are working on. Because of the light color of the primer, we are able to see all the damage and imperfections that the car has. So we move on. And I'm gonna grind some of the damage here because I'm gonna weld some stud pins and try to pull as much as I can. That way I won't have to use much filler in the end. Bodywork can be really complicated to explain or even show on a video. It's just a lot of sanding and putting on filler and sanding again and shaping. It's a little difficult to explain, so let's just go to the front line and see what I have to say. So I primered the car, and now that I primered the car, I'm able to see all the damage. And I marked it with the Sharpie. As you can see, there's a dent here, there's a few more here. A lot of damage on the quarter panel. Other side is even worse. Here I had some high spots that I had to hit with the hammer. And by hitting the high spots, some of the dents came out. Not perfectly, but mostly. This body line up here, there was a lot of Bondo done from the previous owner, so I'm gonna try to grind it all down and redo it and try to bring it back to stock like I did over here. So I had to grind it to metal, I'm gonna just put some primer over this and feather it out a little more. The same goes with all the body lines. There's just so many layers. I don't know if you can tell, but there's like 3, 4, 5 different layers of paint on here, and all the little details. I'm gonna try to get it as perfect as I can. There was some damage here. All of this that was down to metal, and then it has some damage down here as well. This one, I pulled it out with the studs as much as I could and tried to shape it back again with the Bondo. Same goes with the front of the car. I don't know, people always back up into these and they damage them. Just so much paint from the previous owners, and they rattle can this car like 3 times for some reason. And rattle can paint is so thick. All this takes time, so I know through the video it looks like it's all done in a few days, but it's not. It's probably a few weeks, months. But it's just the fun part, so. So we go ahead and move on with the fun stuff, and we spray primer all over the bodywork that we just did. After, we go ahead and spray some black guide coat all over, as you can see on the images. After that, we make sure we block sand the complete car using the guide coat to assure that we don't leave any small dents or deep scratches behind. Let's make sure we block sand everywhere that we are going to paint, that way we don't have paint falling off later. I've seen this on a lot of cars where the bottom of the fender is messed up because the jack is put in the wrong place, but a hammer and a dolly should straighten it back out. Okay, now that we completely sanded the whole car, we can go ahead and move on and spray some primer sealer on the car. Okay, so I just finished doing the sealer on the car, which is the last step on the bodywork at some point. Now that the primer sealer is on, if you're satisfied with it, go ahead and move on to the next step. We're getting closer and closer to spraying the whole car. But what I like to do first, I like to do the door jambs before I spray the rest of the car. So as you can see, I already scuffed it, already did the masking and all. So I'm gonna do the door jambs, let it dry for a day, and then close the door behind me and do the rest of the car. I'm also gonna do the inside of the fender, that way I can just, once I let this dry, shut the hood and do the rest of the car. I'm about to paint the door jambs in the car. I'm also going to do the under the trunk, inside of the fenders, and behind the gas cap. Also, I'm going to shoot the car in what is known as a 2-stage, which is a base coat then a clear coat. But the door jambs, I'm going to shoot them in a single stage mode, which is the base coat mixed with the clear coat. And I'm going to show you how I mix my 2-stage and make it into a single stage. Here I'm adding some clear coat into a cup. Then I am going to go ahead and add some hardener to it as well. Okay, now that you have your clear coat and your base coat, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and drop some clear coat in the base coat. Make it a single stage. If you're wondering if I'm gonna add some reducer to this, I am. Just a little bit, just to make it flow a little more. If you're wondering how much clear coat should you add to the base coat when you're making it into a single stage, I would hesitate to tell you exact ratio because it's gonna vary on what kind of paint you're using, along with the spray gun and so on. I'll say, if possible, play around with it, a little and see if it works for you. And the same goes with the reducer. If it's spraying a little thick, add a little more. If the paint's coming out a little too flat, go ahead and add a little more clear. You know, see what works for you. Alright, now that the interior is painted, we can start removing the masking tape. Keep in mind that the paint is going to have somewhat of a flat or a semi-gloss reflection on the clear due to the way we mixed it, turning it into a single stage. And once you're done, you pretty much take it all off, just double check it, make sure it's all good, and close the door and paint the rest of the car. Seconds before I spray down my base coat, I went ahead and cleaned the complete car with the tack cloth. And starting at the roof, making our way down, we go ahead and start spraying our first coat of base coat. So just like that, we spray a few coats around the car, and once we see that it's covered completely and it's got the right tone, we can go ahead and move on and start spraying some clear coat like I am right here. And right here is where my GoPro decides to record sideways for some reason. But you get the idea. I sprayed the clear coat the same way as the base coat, starting on the roof, making your way down, panel by panel, 3 to 4 coats, and call it a day. So we came back the next day and we inspected the clear coat. We got a little bit of dirt, a few drips, and some orange peel, but that's nothing to worry about because that could all be fixed with some wet sanding. So this morning I'm wet sanding the whole car. That way I could come back with the buffer and some rubbing compound and polish the complete clear coat. And that way I could end up with a super smooth and nice and glossy finish. So now we started to put the car together, and I enjoy this part because this is where you get to see your project come together into one piece. Or it's sort of like putting the last pieces of the puzzle. While the headlights are off the car, I'm gonna go ahead and clean them from oxidation with some rubbing compound. This is how they look after. Top one is how it looked before. So we put the headlights back on, and just like that, the car is ready. And it came out really nice, and it looks really good. So let's take a little walk around it and see what we got. So here we have the passenger quarter panel. We had some bare metal at the beginning that we had to work with, and it's looking really good now. The front of the car had some damage as well on the hood. The grille still needs a little bit of a better placement. The front bumper had some additional holes that they did for the license plate, and I had to fill those up with filler, and I left the two original ones on there. Also, the driver's side fender had that body line that we worked with, that we brought back, and I'm glad we did because that looks really good now. Driver's side quarter panel did have some damage as well, but it's looking really good now. The trunk and the rear bumper had a little bit of damage, but nothing major. So we take the car outside and see how the paint looks when it's up against the sun. So the plan was paint the car and then sell it, but it came out so nice that I'm just gonna keep it. But we're not done yet, because we have a Toyota MR2 that's gonna get painted up next, so stick around for this one. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you on the next one.